You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Hello and welcome to the Choose FI radio podcast. Very excited about today's episode because we're finally getting a chance to talk with Timika from House of Fi. Very early on, she found our community and she was highlighting some of the things that she was actually taking action on, and I was blown away. Now, we're going to have to pin down whether or not I claimed the moniker Reluctant Frugalist first or she did, but she was running with it and doing a far better job than I was talking about some of these different concepts. We're going to be able to talk about a fully funded lifestyle change, pursuing FI as a family with different values, and just building this talent stack one piece at a time. And I think her story is so compelling, and I'm incredibly excited to share it with you. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm doing quite well. Yeah, this should be a wonderful episode. I think for anybody who's been a part of our Facebook group for any length of time, they recognize Tamika's name. She's an ever-present in that group, and she's just so positive, and her comments are extremely valuable. And I was thrilled to see that she started a podcast recently called House of Fi with another active member of our community, Wendy. So yeah, should be a wonderful story. And with that, Timika, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you guys both for having me. And I will say, first and foremost, it was you, Jonathan. You thought of the name Reluctant Frugalist.
Yes.
If anybody listened to those beginning episodes, and I think that I'm very similar to you in this way, I throw out ideas all the time. You threw out Reluctant Frugalist, you threw out Second Generation Fi. There were so many things that you were just saying, and I hopped on it and I took the moniker.
You own it. You can have it. It's amazing. I just can't wait to see what you do with it. But let's go back. Tell us a little bit more about your story. So pre-Fi, pre-college, can you give us kind of some sense, was money something that was discussed in the home?
Yeah, so this is something that I've thought about a lot just in my Fi journey, just trying to figure out where my money story started. For me, my parents were immigrants from Barbados, and we actually lived in a housing project the first half of my life. But I'm grateful for my experience because we all know the concept of the American dream. They were able to serve as examples of how that American dream can progress. And I was able to witness side hustling. My dad was a DJ on the side. I was able to witness saving and working hard. And so they didn't have the nuance of, let's say, a professional financial coach, but they did have the basics of earn and save.
So earn and save. Were there any overt lessons that came from your parents about what to do with that money or how much you should save? Were there ever conversations, or was it just something you picked up from being a member of the household?
No, there were actually conversations. They were just the most introductory of conversations. So my father actually took us to the bank and said, this is how you make a deposit and you should always save. But it's not like he told us how much to save or where to put the savings besides in a bank account. And it wasn't until later that he acknowledged that there was a teller that actually told him, you have a lot of money saved in this checking account or the savings account. And if you want, there's something called a certificate of deposit. They have 15%, 10% interest. And if you're okay with putting it in one of those vehicles, you can go and talk to that gentleman over there and we can get you all set up. So there were things that he didn't even know and had to learn and act on along the way. And that's the starting point that I had. Take some money that you make and put it away. No further guidance beyond that, but I'm grateful for the guidance that they did give.
So I know that side hustles are actually a really big part of your story, and we're going to explore one that you're crushing in just a few minutes here. But I'm curious, is there any corollary between your immigrant background and your willingness to be thinking about side hustles and looking for viable side hustles?
Oh, absolutely. I think that just the perspective of an immigrant coming to the country and pursuing a targeted dream means that when they get here and they're figuring everything out and they're finding their way, they may be more likely to supplement their income using some other side hustles, using some other forms of income production. And for me, my dad, he worked for the MBTA in Massachusetts, which is a pensioned position eventually after you finish a certain number of years. But on the side, he was a DJ. He DJ'd parties in the community for other immigrants. I should also mention that when I talk about my dad who DJ'd, that's my stepfather. My biological father also had side hustles. He worked at MIT during the day, handling the finances for one of the groups there. And as a side hustle, he also did taxes for people in the community. So those were the examples that I had growing up. And when I look back on that, it wasn't something that I said to myself, oh, I want to do that when I grow up. I need to have side hustles. But when I came to focusing on my finances, it was an option for me that I was happy to pursue.
It sounds like you had this entrepreneurial bent and you had the family to look to of people that were exhibiting this type of behavior with the underlying principle that it's important to save your money. But I know that when you finally graduated school, you came out with $94,000 in student loan debt. How do we get there? What happens to lead us there?
The concept of pursuing the American dream used to be this really basic concept that you can come here and you could get a degree and you can begin a job. Or, I think even before that, you didn't even need the degree. But somewhere along the way, that dream became distorted. It became bloated. And the idea was that you had to get a degree in order to get the job, and that things were kind of stacked against you and you had to do certain steps in order to reach the next level. And I fell prey to that. My parents fell prey to that. And we signed up for the loans. And there were things that we did to mitigate the loans, but the planning wasn't there. The knowledge wasn't there soon enough or early enough to completely avoid them. The goal was still there, that you had to do it. You had to finish. So pursuing something that you're not quite prepared financially for can oftentimes lead you to spending more money for it than you need to.
Yeah, Timika, that's certainly a good point. And talk me through the actual college decision, the decision to take out those loans. And was there any intentionality behind the decision for college or for the particular degree that you pursued? I guess taking out $94,000 in loans is pretty significant, but was it this American dream? Is that what guided it, or was there intentionality behind your decisions?
So for me, going into college, I wanted to become a doctor. And when I started at UVA, University of Virginia, I was pre-med. And along the way, I moved away from being pre-med. And because I loved sociology and I loved writing and women's studies and all of that, I ended up with a dual degree in basically liberal art. And it wasn't very long after that I realized that while I had pursued something that I loved, I needed to also pursue something that was going to give me a job. And I went back to school immediately for my master's in accounting.
So let's pause here. You graduate with a master's in accounting. How much do you have? $94,000 in debt at this point, or is this a smaller number?
So at that point, my first degree had cost me $24,000. $24,000 that I didn't even need to pay, and I can go into that afterwards. And my second degree had cost me about $35,000. The problem was that over time, all of the unsubsidized loans were ballooning. I think when I first went, my interest rates on the first component, the $24,000 were about 2%. And by the time I finished my master's, those later loans were about 6.5%. And I worked in accounting. I worked at one of the big four here in Boston. And eventually my mom, she went through a medical procedure. And while I was in the hospital with her, just checking in on her, I talked to the nurses. And that's when I, said to myself, I want to do medicine. I want to go back and I would become a nurse. And so that last degree cost me another maybe $30,000.
Okay, so you're about 60 in debt, and then you decide to pivot and go back to nursing, and nursing cost about an additional 30, getting you roughly between the interest and the actual principal close to just above $90,000 in student loan debt. I have a couple follow-up questions. One was, you kind of pointedly said there, I paid $24,000 to UVA that in retrospect, I really didn't need to. I'd love first to stop and explore that a little bit further.
Yeah, so UVA gives a really good amount to out-of-state applicants, and that's beyond need. they try to give you a really good package. And for me, I finished in the top of my class here in Boston. So I had offers from UMass Amherst and some other schools with very good packages. And in fact, UMass Amherst offered me a full scholarship. If you finish in the top certain percentage in Massachusetts, you get this scholarship that I didn't even know about. But I didn't want to go to UMass Amherst. In addition, my dad works at MIT. If you work at MIT as a full-time employee, your children can go there for free. And I didn't want to go to MIT at the time. I went to the University of Virginia. They gave me a great package. And MIT, if your children go somewhere else, they pay 50%. So UVA gave me 50% or more, and MIT paid 50%. So for the first year, I paid nothing. I actually got refund money. And over that summer, in between first year and second year, I decided to buy a Honda Civic. I thought that when I asked my dad if he'd help me, I was going to work all summer. I found a really good job that paid a really good amount of money, like $15 an hour or something. I saved it all. I saved a good $3,000. And I asked him if he would help me find a car. And he actually took me to the dealer, and I walked out with a brand new Honda Civic. And I kept that car for a long time, but that's not what I was expecting. I actually was expecting that he would say I had to buy a used car. And so on one hand, I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. I can get a brand new car. And I was excited. And on the other hand, that wasn't actually what I expected. So I could have definitely had less. But the thing he didn't tell me was that going forward, I'd have to send him my refund checks to pay that bill. And that is what led to that $24,000 Honda Civic. I probably would have finished with about $5,000.
Okay. It's interesting to look back at this run through college with the benefit of hindsight. I'm really curious though, as a nurse, which is where you ended up landing, and you definitely make above the median income. Let's say your kids wanted to go into the nursing field. Is $30K what it costs to get a nursing degree, or is there a smarter way to get that as well?
Absolutely a smarter way to get it. And I don't know if this way will still exist when they're going into school, but you can go and become a CNA after you finish high school. And there are actually some vocational high schools that will prep you to become a certified nursing assistant. And you can go and work in a hospital, or more likely a nursing home. It's not the easiest work. It can be physically and mentally draining. You could then go into a 2-year program, one that's through a community college, and get a lot of funding to do that, and then go on to finish your degree through some of the bridge programs that they have in nursing. And I know specifically UMass Boston here in Massachusetts has a program that costs about $10,000. It's a bridge program, and that's before you get any assistance with student loans or hopefully with grant money. And plus you'd be working at the time, so you can pay it as you go and use employer rebates or employer benefits to pay that down as well.
That is huge. That's an incredible way of looking at the problem, and I love that.
Well, and the thing is that even when I decided to go back to nursing, I still had this, I didn't want to take out more loans. It was very harsh to face the amount of loans that I had. And I spoke to the nurses and they said, oh, where should I go? Should I go to BC? Do I have to go to the best school? I didn't say those words, I have to go to the best school, but where should I go? And the nurse looked at me and she said, we all end up at the same place. Find the cheapest program, go to UMass Boston. My eyes just opened up and I said, yeah, I already knew that. I already knew that because at Deloitte, I started with my $35,000 GW degree. Deloitte is the public accounting firm I worked at. In my starting group, there were people from UMass Lowell who paid $10,000, people from University of Connecticut online program that started with $10,000. And I had paid much more for that job than they did. So I knew that, but there's still that pull and just overbuy.
Yeah, I think that's very natural. And that was a question that I was going to ask you is the degree the essential part, or does it matter where you're getting it from? And it certainly sounds like this is just a check the box type scenario, right? As you're describing it.
It's just a check the box type scenario. Absolutely. You have a lot of electricians and carpenters. And so there is that component to nursing school. It is a trade. And if you approach it like a trade, you can do it for much cheaper than I did.
Yeah. And it's important to know the rules of the game in essence. And like you described at Deloitte, which is a big four accounting firm, you would think that prestige of the college would matter some, but I know from my own personal experience, it matters zero. People just care,
Zero.
right? Like it matters none. And they just care, what type of job do you do while you're there? Not where did you come from? I remember in my starting class, we had a couple kids from Ivy League schools, and they were underperformers. And of course, it's anecdotal, but like the larger point is nobody really cared where you went to college. And certainly nobody cared where the managers or partners went to college. So if you find yourself in a job where it really doesn't matter, then like you said, check the box. Try to find the least expensive way you possibly can to move forward. So if you don't mind, I wanted to go back and just ask for a little college hack. We're always looking to tease out that information that can help someone else. So you said your father worked at MIT and that would have enabled you to go there for free. Now, of course, everybody doesn't work for MIT, but there are many people who work for universities in some regard. Do you know, and of course this is a broad brush, but do you know if that's a general policy that many universities have? And also, did it help you gain acceptance to MIT?
So it's definitely a policy that other universities, especially here in Boston, have, and I imagine in other places as well, that your child can go to that college for a discounted rate or for free. I know that Boston College here has a program. Of course, MIT does as well. So it is something to look into. And it's also something that, one day when my kids are a little older, I wouldn't mind working in student health at one of the colleges here if that's one of the benefits, because it's a huge benefit financially for them and for me.
Let's talk about this $94,000 in student loan debt. So something lit a spark underneath you to pay it off. It's not the normal course to just say, man, I have 94K. Let me see how quickly I can pay it down. What was that moment for you?
There were a couple of sparks. I think like a little bit of Tindering. There was just a lot going on.
You had Tinder.
Yeah, I had some Tinder. One of the things that really bothered me was that there was such a discrepancy in the student loan interest, and that I don't remember knowing the interest rates beforehand, or not in a way that I paid attention to. So when I came out and I realized the discrepancy between 6.5% and 2%, combined with the fact that I purchased a car, a house, and got percentage rates of 0% and 3.5 or 4% maybe at the time, I just felt that it wasn't right, that education, the thing that you need, the other things you don't necessarily need. You don't need to buy a house. You don't need to buy a car. The education, which is part of this American pursuit, was so much more expensive than these other wants. To me, that's how I felt at the time. And also, I tried to sign up for the public student loan forgiveness program. And because my husband at the time made a certain amount of money, it wouldn't work out. I couldn't get the forgiveness. So those two things, those two ideas just really bothered me. And at that time, my idea was to join the military as a nurse. I became a reservist. And one of the nurses that I went to school with actually went full time, which is how I knew about this. She got $120,000, I believe, of her student loans paid off. And in the reserves, you get about $50,000 that goes straight to your student loans. So I knew about that. I was interested in it. I had always thought of it. And I took the chance to go ahead and I used the money from my weekends, my one weekend a month, and also the money from the bonus, the sign-on bonus, to pay off my student loans.
Wow. So just to clarify, you became a reservist. I mean, obviously there's an obligation that we could talk about in a separate conversation, but quantify how much that was worth in the context of paying down $94,000 in student loan debt.
Yeah. So it came out to be somewhere in the 30s for the actual paid amount. In the past, they used to just put the full 50,000 and broken up into 3 years. So 20, 20, and 10 without taxes taken out. But I guess that people were getting hit with tax implications after the fact that they didn't prepare for. So when I went through, my first payment was $20,000, but the additional payments were tax adjusted. So it came out to be about 35 total once you accounted for taxes.
Okay. So we're like 1/3 of the way done. But you keep going past this. This isn't the one decision. Somewhere along the way, you make the decision to jack up your savings rate. What makes you think that is normal? If that Jim Rohn quote, you're the average of the 5 people you're spending the most time with, is true, and no one around you is paying down their debt like you are, what incentivizes you to make a different choice?
I actually went through a divorce. That means that second income, that we were very comfortable. We ate out a lot. We did certain things that we were spending money on, and I had a good amount saved and I was making a decent amount of money. So I just kind of drifted. And when it turned out that we were choosing to go through the divorce process, I snapped out of it, and I decided that not only had I let time pass where I didn't optimize my debt payoff and optimize my savings, but now was the best time to get back to being completely independent of anybody else and not relying on anyone else's incomes to make myself feel more comfortable and more luxe. It was time to clean it all up and to never look back.
I mean, this is actually really, really incredible. And I think it's important to not just breeze right by this. You're from an immigrant family, growing up in the projects, coming out of school with $90,000 in student loan debt, post-divorce. What I see is extreme ownership. Like you're owning your situation and you're moving yourself and your family to a better place. Do you have any kids?
I do. I have 3 kids, and I agree with what you're saying. My situation is completely my own. And when I realize, sometimes you have that kind of out of body experience or like this just moment of awareness where you can step back and say, wow, this is what's happening right now, and take a look around and figure it all out. I have those experiences sometimes, and I want to make sure that when I get to the end of my life, that I've been a motivating factor in my own life. But yes, I have 3 kids, and this is something that I also try to impart on them in a very age-appropriate way. I have a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 4-year-old.
Tamika, you're describing this period of drift, right, after the divorce. What woke you up from that? So you're saying you have these moments, but there had to be one specific moment that you decided to get back on this path that you clearly were on when you decided to become a reservist. I mean, that's not something that people do lightly. You clearly were very dedicated, and then you had this drift, but then you came back. Like, can you point us to that specific moment?
So I had started this process. I joined the military. I was going to pay off these loans. Then there was a little bit of a lull. And then when I was hit with the second experience of going through this separation, that's when I was really jolted awake again. And I began to be more resourceful and do more learning and teaching around the process. I found Dave Ramsey, first of all, and eventually I found Choose FI. And throughout the process, I began to dream a little bit bigger. And that's what led me to where I am today.
It's hard to visualize that transition. What gets you from the one side, which is that drift state, to someone that is like, I'm going to start building my talent stack. I'm going to build this side hustle. I'm going to start this podcast. I'm going to teach my kids how to code. Those are 2 different people. What happens to get us there?
So paying off the debt gave me bandwidth. It gave me cash flow. It gave me the feeling of cleaning up the mess, losing the bloat, the financial bloat. From there, finding FI gave me the ability to create my dream, to develop my dream that's specific to me, not an American dream that's defined by somebody else, and not something that's external to me that I'm reaching for. But what do I want to do, and how do I want to do it? By seeing people in the community doing these amazing things with these high savings rates and pursuing traveling, pursuing what they thought had meaning for them, I began to consume, I began to create, and I began to build my talent stack. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
Tamika, that's amazing. As you were saying that, I'm writing down cleaning up the mess. You found FI and it helped you create your dream that was specific to you. That is so empowering. And I hope people in the audience hear that and say that you don't have to deal with the American dream, the immigrant dream, anybody else's dream, right? It's about you. That's the crucial part here. And I just absolutely love this. So you found Dave Ramsey, you found FI, paid off your debt. Where do you go from here? Where does your story start on this next chapter?
There's so many things I learned from listening to Choose FI podcast. But along the way, I also saw what other people were doing and creating in their lives. So knowing what other people could do, normal people who were choosing to focus and clean up their finances, and seeing what that act allowed them to pursue. It was kind of a natural process when I found out about the lice clinics. I was a school nurse. There was an outbreak, and I just saw it as an opportunity. And because of what I'd seen and learned from the FI community, I also had the courage to take the chance. And instead of buying a $20,000 car, buying a $20,000 business.
This is so incredible. I got to stop and pause here just to highlight this, because while you may have learned so much from the FI community, I genuinely think that the collective FI community is about to learn something really, really incredible for you. So to set the stage here, you're working as a nurse in Boston and you see a lice outbreak and you see a problem that needs a solution. And instead of purchasing another depreciating asset like a car, you decide, you look into and you research and you find out that you can basically start a business to solve that problem for about the same amount.
Yes.
Wow. So how did you find out about a lice clinic? That's not something that's ever popped up on my Google feed. That's not something that I would know how to just start. Tell us what this business model looks like.
So, lice. Some of your listeners might be itching right now just at the mention of the word.
Tamika, I can guarantee you that my wife Laura is itching. This is her biggest fear in the world.
She's now checking both of your kids instantly.
And the funny thing is we actually got lice one time and went to a lice clinic. And I thought,
Yay!
wow, this is a brilliant business model. So now I know a lice clinic owner. So I want to hear more.
Yes. So the process of getting rid of lice, and it's something that I didn't know at the beginning, it is a very long process, especially because lice are good at hiding. Therefore, by the time a mom and dad find lice, it has been a number of weeks. So to get rid of it, when you don't know what you're looking for, you don't have the tools at home, you find it at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night or something when there's school tomorrow. It's always at the most inopportune time. It leads you to a frantic panic mode, an itchy, frantic panic mode. What happens when you have a lice clinic is I actually have a patented machine, and I did purchase a licensed territory to do this. I take the machine. It's about a 45-minute to 1 hour process. It dehydrates all of those bugs, all of those eggs, and then we comb out or remove the dead debris. And you leave the clinic without lice after 45 minutes to an hour without needing to do any of that follow-up combing, follow-up oiling, or anything else.
All right. So let's just start by saying brilliant idea. Obviously, all of us here are collectively thinking that, but let's go a little bit deep here. Let's talk about the economics of this. First of all, who told you that you could do this? I mean, what background did you have? How did you even know that this is something that would be profitable? Let's go back to day one, not someone now that's on the other end of it and is saying this was the most amazing thing ever, but someone that's thinking, maybe I should buy a lice machine. What does that actually look like?
Yeah, I can give you some of those details. But first, I'd like to say that this entire FI journey, starting from Mr. Money Mustache and his first blog post that I ever read, has opened my eyes because it brings up that question of who are you to do this? And it opens the door for you to say, wait, normal people are doing extraordinary things. I'm normal too, so I could do the same thing. I can be extraordinary.
Oh, that's so awesome. Write that down, Brad. Are you writing that down?
At the moment.
But in terms of the numbers, I have purchased cars before, $20,000 cars. And so I saw the value in those purchases at the time. When I was faced with the idea of purchasing a territory, I immediately saw the value, not because I was already used to spending $20,000 in one drop. I was not, but because I saw and knew that a depreciating asset over here was something that I purchased. And now I'm purchasing the opportunity to make a six-figure income, a side income, using this other type of investment.
Wait a second. How did you know that this was going to be a six-figure income as a side hustle? I mean, this isn't something that I see pop up when I type in side hustles that make six figures. This doesn't show up on Google anywhere. I'm a great Googler. I go to the 5th page. I've never seen that. How did you know that this was a six-figure gig?
Well, because I have been, watching and learning people, I decided that I'm not going to go into things blindly anymore. And so I asked I started, because I was a little bit hesitant to do it, contacting clinic owners in other states so that no one here would feel like I was trying to like compete with them or whatever. And I just felt more comfortable doing that. I contacted the company itself and talked to them. I went over the numbers with them. And of course, they're a company. They're going to try to sell their most successful clinics to you. But I made sure to reach out to multiple clinic owners by phone and talk to them. And I actually found one here in Massachusetts. She's the owner of Lice Clinics of Danvers. We are lice BFFs. We literally talk to each other all the time. And she was the one who turned her screen around. She logged into her Square dashboard and she turned her screen around and showed me her previous month, which just blew my mind. Blew my mind, the amount of money that she was making. And it does take a lot of hard work. It does take the courage to make an initial investment in yourself and in this company. But once I had that as an example, and then knowing what I believed about myself and what I'd come to believe about what was possible, I knew I had to try it. And at the most, it would be a $20,000 mistake.
Tamika, I love this self-belief that has really come up from you being part of the FI community. Normal people are doing extraordinary things. I think you just said, like, what I've come to believe about myself. That's really a remarkable thing. And I want everybody to slow down and hear that because it's essential. Talk me through, though. You have a family, you have a full-time job as a nurse, and you're buying this territory in Boston to run a lice clinic. Did you anticipate having to work X number of hours? Did you build this from the very start as a business that you would have employees and you would just essentially be the owner? Like, talk us through the thought process.
Yeah, I anticipated that it was going to be a number of hours outside of my working day. As a school nurse, I get out of work at about 3:15 or so. And so I have quite a bit of time in the evenings. I figured that I would have to devote, at least in that first year and possibly more, time in my evenings and weekends. But in the FI community, if you need to create more money, you get a side hustle and you give your nights and your weekends to pay off a debt. So I figured this was another time where I could just dig in and give some time to something that was mine and not to something that was owned by a different company or person.
But it also strikes me that you were willing to bootstrap this. So there were some fixed costs. You had to buy this equipment that was somewhere between 20 to 25,000. I think it was for, I think you said earlier, it was for 4 of these dehydration machines. But once you have the machines, you're not doing this out of your living room, right? I mean, this is an actual brick and mortar business. That's what I find so fascinating about this. Talk me through that. I'm just imagining Tamika goes up to this vacant commercial lot and goes to the owner and says, hey, I wanted to know whether or not I could do a lice clinic inside your building. Like, just walk me through that conversation.
Yeah, so I have to say that when you choose to do a lice clinic, and this might be something that goes into your decision making if you're thinking about starting a side hustle, if you want to find a place and you have to tell them that you're starting a lice clinic, first of all, you have to explain what it is. And second of all, you have to wait until they stop scratching their heads and can give you their attention, because it brings about the same type of reaction in every person that you tell about it. But yes, I had to pay a certain amount for a territory in Massachusetts that was a protected territory, kind of like a franchise, but it wasn't. It's a license model. And in that money, you get a certain number of machines, you get a starter pack, you get some initial training on the device. There's a portal, there's a Facebook group, and you get connected with some people that can help you, some other clinic owners or some people in corporate that can help you. However, the process when I started, because it was a newer business, wasn't as helpful as you'd think. I would say that the training on the machines and the Facebook group, where I could ask other clinic owners across the nation what their best practices were, and I could search through and find what other people had asked, that was the most beneficial thing. There wasn't very much support outside of that. Nobody helped you get find your location. Nobody helped you with the design of your location. Nobody told you how to set up the Google accounts so that you could do some ads, or how to update your website with new posts for blogging. And so that was all of the stuff that I had to learn over time by putting in that extra time, and also by doing the treatments until I could find a staff. So it was a very trying time. It was a lot of work, but there was this excitement around it because it was mine and I was creating my dream. I was creating my business.
Let's talk about the impact that it's had on your life and that on your family. This is what a talent stack actually looks like, because you were willing to purchase these 4 machines, because that then forced you to then go find a brick or mortar location and forced you to learn how to do website development and marketing, all these other things. Suddenly, you're a totally different person. Catch us up to speed. Where are you and your family at now?
Yes, since opening this business, I have secured a lease. I've learned about that process. I've learned how to do it better than I did, the mistake that I made and things that I could have done better. I've learned about blogging. I've learned about websites. I've learned about the business finances in a deeper way. There's so much that I've built in terms of skills just by jumping in and taking action and doing it, that now that is all behind me, it's just a part of me, and I take it into every new decision that I make. But the thing is, I had to balance my family life in the process of doing this. And there were some key things I had to do along the way to make sure that my family was protected while I was pursuing this business. I didn't mention that I'm now remarried. My husband had a son who's my 12-year-old, and I had a daughter who's my 10-year-old, and they were quickly best friends. And together, my husband and I have a 4-year-old, little Gabriel, and he brings us so much joy. But when I was deciding to pursue the business, I knew that in leaving them to run into the clinic and do a treatment on a Monday or Tuesday night, I needed to leave them in a place that I felt comfortable and that I didn't have guilt about. And so there were certain things that I did. I worked with a KonMari consultant to make sure that my house was running as optimized and as smoothly as possible in my absence. I spoke with my husband about ways that he could be supportive and then ways that I could be supportive. And above all, in building my talent stacks through my business, I incorporated my kids. I teach them what I know. And it's my hope that one day when they're older, they will have some of these talents and skills, and they will be stacked the same way that I am.
So this really is a second generation Phi story. That's amazing. I love the fact that you're looking at your talent stack and how you can pass that to your children. And talk us through any type of specific action that maybe some audience members could take. What have you done? I think I read in the Facebook group that you started coding classes, both for yourself and at least one of your children.
Yes. So some other things that I've done over this past couple of years, or I would say a lot of it's happened over the last year, is I did take a coding boot camp that I was able to get for a wonderful price. If you're a woman, minority, or possible even if you're not, ask if they have scholarship money. I think that my coding boot camp was supposed to cost about $10,000, and I was able to get over 75% off the cost of that.
That's awesome.
To me, I will say that was the best investment that I could have made in terms of podcasting and in terms of websites. At times, because I'm so busy, I need a coach to get myself through my goals. And so having that process took my time, but it has paid dividends since taking that coding course. And I now consider myself technologically savvy versus not. That's a huge difference.
Okay. I want to paint this picture, just compare and contrast where we started maybe at the beginning of this episode. You're graduating with $90,000+ in student loan debt. You're kind of conflicted about what direction you're going to be taking. You're trying to figure out, basically, it's all about just trying to figure out how to get back to debt free. In contrast, now you have a thriving 6-figure side hustle. You have a far beyond median income job that you're also maintaining. And you have an incredibly wonderful family that's taking on these concepts and rolling with them right along with you. I mean, that has to be the perfect story. But I got to think the only non-renewable resource that we all have is time. And you've talked a little bit about the strategies that you use to make sure that your family life is running while you're devoting maybe an outportioned amount of time to this side hustle. But I know one of the things that I'm aware of is that you've pretty well scaled yourself out of the side hustle. So now when you're working on it, it's your choice. But you don't just have a side hustle, you have a business, and that implies that you have systems in place. That's really, really incredible. How long did it take you to feel like you could pull that off?
I would say that it happened maybe around the 8th or ninth month, but I had trouble letting go completely because I didn't know if the systems would fly. But yes, that was my goal from the beginning. I did not want a stressor on my family. I didn't want to always be away from them. I was pursuing FI to be with them. And so I knew that with whatever business I had, I wanted to move out of the business. And so instead of going in Mondays, then Wednesdays, then Thursdays, and maybe a Saturday, and maybe a Sunday, I only go into the clinic on Saturday mornings. I'm there for about 3 hours. I bring materials there. I make sure that it's clean. And if there's anything else that needs to be handled at that time, if there's someone who wants to be seen at that time while I'm there, I'll cover that and I will see them. And that really works for my family. I have 3 employees, and I actually have somebody who took my phone that answers the phone. And so I really do feel like it's something that's happening in the back of my mind. Sometimes I check in on it, but it is separate from me.
You have a back of mind 6-figure side hustle. Like you have achieved
Yes.
something truly remarkable.
And Timika, with 3 hours a week, that's incredible.
Tim
right?
Ferriss is jealous.
Yeah, 4-hour work week. Be
What
damned,
a rookie.
right? Timika, that's incredible. What a wonderful story. And thank you so much for bringing it to the audience.
Thank you.
All right. Now, on most shows, that would be the end of the episode. But Tamika, on this show, we would love to give you the chance to tackle the hot seat. Are you ready for this?
Oh, yeah.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
All right, Timika, question number 1, your favorite blog that's not your own.
Right now, I am reading The Savings Sherpa. It's Justin at The Savings Sherpa. He actually had a post recently, Home Sweet Home, where there was a fire in his apartment. And I want to say 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 or 3 years ago, we had our furnace backed up and we had a ton of smoke damage throughout the house. It actually cost $20,000 or $30,000 through insurance to get it all fixed and cleaned. I'm just really liking his website right now. And I kind of changed through, I read Girl Friday, or I read different things on different weeks. You know how I am. I'm all into everything.
Gotcha. All right. Well, question number 2, your favorite article of all time. Now, this can be one that you wrote or somebody else's.
So everybody says Mr. Muddy Mustache, which of course is one of my favorites of all time. But recently, one of the previous guests, Grumpus Maximus, came onto the podcast, and soon after he wrote an article about gutting it out at work. And the great thing is that I wrote a response article, which is The Road to Retirement, Relearning to Love Work. And that's at thereluctantfrugalist.com. And that has a link to his and a link to mine.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes for today's episode.
Okay.
All right, Timika, question number 3, your favorite life hack.
Opening a business you do not have to be tied to.
Yeah, I would say that's a win.
6 figures for 150 hours a year. Yeah, that's not too bad.
All right. Question number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
I think it should be, what are your big financial mistakes?
Plural.
Instead of your biggest.
Death by 1,000
No.
small to large cuts.
Yeah, I know. I made a lot of mistakes over the past. I guess that the one I could talk about is saving for myself after paying for everything else versus saving first and affording everything else after.
And that's what you do now?
Yeah, that's what I do. That's what I do now. I max out my 457. I have a pension that I put into. I have a 403B, a Roth.
Well,
I do that first and then live on the rest.
That's amazing.
That is amazing. All right, Timika, question number 5, the advice you would give your younger self.
Be more resourceful, create your own mentors, and take action.
All right, Tamika, now on this show, we do have a bonus question for you. And the bonus question is, what single purchase have you made over the past 12 months that has brought the most value to your life?
ATR podcast mic.
Ooh.
I have the very same. That's cool.
Yeah. ATR 2100, is that the one we're talking about?
Yeah, there's a 2100 and then there's another one, the 2020.
That's what you're talking to us on today, right?
Yes.
You sound fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Tamika, this has been absolutely wonderful. And I'm sure there's many people that are listening to this that are going to want to follow up with you, ask you more about maybe your side hustle ventures or how you even started pursuing that, or maybe just find out more about your story because something in it really resonated and connected with maybe something that they're dealing with or struggling with. What is the best way for someone to connect with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Please reach out to me. A year ago, I never could have imagined myself being a guest on this podcast that has meant so much to me over this past year or two. And so thank you so much for letting me share my story. If anybody from my Choose a Fi family wants to reach out to me, I actually started a podcast, the House of Fi podcast with my co-host, Wendy. And you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find me at the Choose a Fi blog section under Reluctant Frugalist or at reluctantfrugalist.com.
Awesome. House of Fi. I'm sorry, I can't let you go. I have a follow-up question. House of Fi. Tell us a little bit more about the focus of your podcast.
Oh, the House of Fi podcast talks about the unique challenges of pursuing Fi as a family while not forgoing the experiences that you have along the way. And so we don't only talk to people with children, but there are some unique things that you have to consider when you're pursuing Fi. And that's what we're trying to do better for ourselves. We try to share our experiences and we also try to source what others have learned from their experiences so that we can pursue Fi while also living our best lives with our families.
Yeah, Timika, it's a great subject matter, and I've listened to a bunch of your early episodes, and they're fantastic. I know looking back to our own early episodes, I cringe, and you guys are way ahead of the curve. So great work. And yeah, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was a real pleasure.
All right, my friends, if you got value from today's episode, if you've been getting value from the episodes up to this point, just take 1 second and press the subscribe button on the platform you're listening to this on. It just lets the providers know you're getting value from the show and you want to be here when we produce additional content. If you want to support us in what we're doing here at Choose FI, here are 4 easy ways. 1, leave us an iTunes review. If you want to do that, just go to choosefi.com/iTunes. 2, use our page to sign up for travel credit cards. If you want to travel the world with miles and points instead of your hard-earned dollars, then just go to choosefi.com/cards and get started today. 3, if you're working on the milestones of Fi, set up a personal capital account to track your progress and use our affiliate link. It's completely free and just go to choosefi.com/PC. P as in Paul, C as in cat. And 4, and most importantly, find your friends, coworkers, and family members who might be open to this message and tell them about the podcast. Have them start with episode 38, The Why of Fi, and right behind that, have them go listen to episode 21, The Pillars of Fi. It is a fantastic starting place. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.